2634, and that's the proposed amendments to agreements between Ryerson University and the City of Toronto. Sam, the record man, signage. There's quite a few deputants here, and I have Nicholas Jennings, G. Chung, Michael Brooks, Sean Bolton, Julia Hannesberg, Bruce Piercy, Kurt Swinghammer, Aaron McGinn, and there may be more. So if we could start, if you're here to address this, I'm going to ask people to come up in this order, starting with Nicholas Jennings, Guy Chung, and Michael Brooks. Nicholas Jennings here. Hello. You can pass me a note if you don't. Are you? Sorry. And then Guy Chung. Thank you very much. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And hello.
You have up to 5 minutes.
Okay. Hello, councillors. I'm here with two purposes. One, I've been asked to read a letter on behalf of the Snyderman family, which I believe you have a copy of in front of you. It reads, from Robert Snyderman, I regret that I am unable to attend today's meeting to address you personally, but I am out of the country attending to a personal family matter. In my absence, my brother Jason and I have asked Nicholas Jennings to read this statement, which I'm now going to do. The cumulative effect of the agreements that were signed in 2008 among Ryerson University, the City of Toronto, and our company was to permit the use of our trademarks so that the Sam the Record Man signs would be reinstalled in the Yonge Street redevelopment or on the Gould Street facade of the Ryerson Student Learning Centre. Ryerson knows that any commemoration plan other than the reinstallation of the signs requires our approval. It was only after the staff action report was released with an alternative plan that Ryerson even made an attempt to contact us. My brother and I support the reinstallation of the signs as per the existing signed agreement and know that our father would have most certainly wanted that to happen. I trust that this will assist you with your decision. Respectfully, Bobby Snyderman. So I've done my duty in reading that on behalf of Robert Snyderman, and I'd now like to make a presentation to the council. My name is Nicholas Jennings. I'm a journalist, historian, and graduate of Ryerson. I've spent my entire career writing about music, including books, TV documentaries, and for 20 years as feature writer and reviewer for Maclean's magazine. One of my books, Before the Gold Rush, focused on the history of Toronto's music scene in the 1960s, especially that of the Yonge Street Strip. I also lead walking tours exploring the Strip's musical history. Yonge Street from Queen to Gerrard during the 1950s and 60s was a hotbed of entertainment, and the entire stretch was lit by the dazzling neon signs of dozens of live music clubs, all featuring local and international jazz, blues, country, soul, and rock and roll acts. And I had planned to list a lot of the clubs and the storied history behind a lot of the clubs between Queen and Gerrard Street, but in the interest of time, I'm going to just allow you to read those that I've submitted and jump ahead to my conclusion here. Yonge Street was the birthplace of the Toronto sound, the fusion of rhythm and blues and rock made famous by local bands like the Mandela, Steppenwolf, John Lee and the Checkmates, David Clayton Thomas and the Shays, and the group that went on to become world famous, known simply as the Band. Here's what Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Robbie Robertson of the Band has to say about that era. Quote, Toronto was a mecca of talent in the 1950s and 60s. It was the center of Toronto's nightlife and entertainment. There should be more of an effort to preserve that center. Yonge Street shouldn't become a discarded part of the history of the city, unquote. I might add, nor should it be sanitized as to eradicate all traces of that era. Toronto needs reminders of Yonge Street's rich cultural past. The Sam's neon sign is just that kind of reminder. It stood smack in the middle of the Yonge Street Strip, casting a glow that drew millions to its three creaky, uneven floors, which were decorated with posters, promotional banners, autographed artist photos, and contained aisle upon aisle of 400,000 records across all genres. Visiting artists from Liberace and Tony Bennett to Elton John and Alice Cooper frequented the store, while the diversity of Sam's selections became a vital source of influence for many Canadian musicians. The Sam's neon sign was a landmark for Torontonians and visitors alike, and was certainly the most identifiable symbol of Toronto until the CN Tower came along. Its preservation and resurrection on Yonge Street would be an entirely appropriate way to recognize the city's past in an ultimately very cool way. As a friend of mine put it, it sure beats a tombstone in the sidewalk and a brass plaque on the wall. Although I might add that a brass plaque would provide the sign with some useful contextual information. Madam Chairman and councillors, you did the right thing in 2008 in trying to give the SAMS sign a heritage designation. You also did the right thing in reaching an agreement with Ryerson, my alma mater, to ensure that the signs would be remounted on Yonge Street. Now you have a chance to do the right thing again and reject these proposed amendments. Save the SAMS sign and see that it is reinstalled where it belongs. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? I have a question that in its current form, it's not a very environmentally friendly sign. Do you have any suggestions about that?
Yes, well, Madam Chair, I think that I have concerns with the report that you have before you from the city staff because it basically relies on information provided by Ryerson and its architect. And I think that what it behooves the council to do is to look for additional independent information. At the very least, the issue of environmental safety should be checked with neon sign experts. And I might reference the Toronto Star article that appeared yesterday, in which the designers of the SAMS neon sign and many, many, many other neon signs across the city and in other parts of the world, the Markle brothers, world-famous designers of neon signs, have very strong views and opinions that I think the council should consider, rather than just going with the information that you have before you in the staff report.
Is that about neon?
That's about neon, yes.
Could you tell me what they had to say?
Well, I would have to pull out the article.
That's fine.
I
If
could-
you
I
have
could
it,
submit
maybe
the
you could leave it
Toronto
with
Star
us.
article from
Yeah.
yesterday lists a lot of the Markle brothers' views about the safety of neon. And one of the points they make, Madam Chairman, is that if mercury in neon signs was really an environmental hazard, New York City and Tokyo and all kinds of places around the world would be, in trouble. And I think it's a very good point. I don't know that it's been fully proven that neon is an environmental hazard. And even if it was, Madam Chairman, I would think that the resources that Ryerson has within its staff and student body could look at innovative ways to come up with alternatives then to illuminating the sign. I mean, Ryerson has put forward a number of arguments, including the cost and of illuminating the sign. Well, why not come up with some innovative solutions to that? I mean, the Ryerson is a brain trust. Go back to the Ryerson community itself and ask for solutions. Another point Ryerson brings up in the report before you is that, well, unfortunately, the sign doesn't fit with the design. Well, Madam Chair, with all due respect to Ryerson and its architectural firm, I have a hard time with that because they knew from the get-go that they were to incorporate the SAMS neon sign. So why come up with a design that is incompatible with that?
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Matlow, you have some.
About those 2 points. The argument that we've heard from some, including staff, around the environmental concerns and mercury leakage in the case of fire, et cetera, is this new information since Ryerson signed an agreement to retain and preserve and remount the sign?
Councillor Matlow, I believe it is new information. At least it is to me. I haven't heard that argument before about the environmental issues.
What I mean is it a new information that Ryerson was dealing with neon? Should they be surprised?
No, I see your point. I see your point. No, it's not new information. They've known for 6 years now.
Do you also understand another argument that we've heard regarding design, and you mentioned it well. Ryerson now says that the sign doesn't fit into their design of the new structure. But if they had signed an agreement in 2008, why do you understand why they would not design a structure that would accommodate the very sign that they committed to remounting upon it?
It baffles me, frankly, Councillor. It baffles me that they wouldn't have. I mean, they knew in advance they had to incorporate it, so they've clearly dropped the ball on the design.
And lastly, why do you believe that it's important to remount the sign in the neighborhood, in the area where it originally was, rather than put it on some building elsewhere or another city, or at the worst case scenario, store it hidden from public view in some Ryerson facility?
Because I believe that Toronto needs reminders of its cultural heritage, and they should be prominent and mixed in with modern design. I mean, the old and the new works very well together, and I think the SAM sign would be actually a very cool addition to the side of the Ryerson building. It's an opinion that's shared by many, many in the music industry. I don't know why the agenda doesn't contain Gordon Lightfoot's letter. It was submitted and should have been in the documents there. And there was also a letter that came from the national organization Music Canada, representing all the major record labels in Canada. That was also submitted to the committee. I didn't see it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I missed it. But it should be in your documents. And Music Canada states that they believe that Ryerson should be held to its agreement and made to put up the sign, because that was the deal, and it would honor Toronto's cultural heritage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Not, thank you very much for coming, Mr. Jennings. Ms. Chung,
Madam
you
Chair.
have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you. Madam Chair, council members, I have appeared before you in the capacity as a community leader with the
Is that
Am I on?
microphone on? Okay.
It is on. I should
Thank you.
start again. Madam Chair, council members, I have appeared before you in the past in the capacity as a community leader of the Greater Yorkville Residents Association. However, today I am here as a music industry veteran of 35 years, and I am sure the many industry veterans of the Toronto music scene, plus the countless number of fans who flock to Sam the Record Man to browse and purchase records of their favorite Canadian artists, are reacting with dismay at Ryerson University's intention to renege on their undertaking to restore and reinstall the iconic Sam the Record Man neon signs. The famed neon signs are unique and powerful symbols of our great Canadian music industry. The vinyl albums, EPs, and singles of all Canadian recording artists from coast to coast were to be found in Sam's stores. Toronto music producer Terry Brown, founding member of the Canadian Independent Record Producers Association, and a major player in the development of the Canadian music business, adds, Sam the Record Man played a huge role in the development and sustainability of Canadian talent throughout my career, and supported many artists, including Motherlode, Mo Kaufman, Crowbar, Rush, Max Webster, Stampeders, Toronto, Klaatu, Dominique Troiano, and the list goes on, yet this is only my list. The Yonge Street store was surrounded by clubs and taverns, including the Colonial Tavern, Le Coq d'Or, Club Blue Note, and the Zanzibar, that featured the best musical talent, including such revered names as Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks, later known as the Band, Robbie Robertson, and David Clayton Thomas. Several of my colleagues and I will be discussing the creation of Legends of Yonge Street, celebrating Yonge Street's musical heritage 1955 to 1975. We intend to approach and work with the city's new Toronto Music Advisory Committee to promote Yonge Street's rich music heritage. The neon signs will be a significant visual reminder of our music legacy at these nostalgic events. I hope you council members recognize Mr. Snyderman's monumental contribution to the Canadian music industry, and you further recognize the neon signs are an integral component of Mr. Snyderman's legacy. To consent to Ryerson will send a message that to developers that the city is pliant in matters concerning heritage. This will set a dangerous precedent whereby developers of sites worthy of heritage designation will willingly sign agreements to forward their own agenda and, at a later date, proffer disingenuous arguments to break their end of the deal. Council members, please be a friend to the music industry and support our Canadian music heritage. and do your part by preserving a famous feature of Yonge Street's cultural heritage by insisting Ryerson honor their agreement to restore and reinstall the signage. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions, Ms. Chung? Thank you for being here today. Appreciate that. Can I ask the staff to please turn up those microphones for the deputants? They're the RAV staff. And while I'm calling up Michael Brooks from Airden Bearless, could you give me the high sign that you heard me? Yes, you did. Thank you. Thanks very much. Yes. Oh, so you're replacing yourself with them? So you're coming off the list, is what you're... All right, thank you. All right. Next up, Sean Bolton. Good afternoon. You have, welcome. You have 5 minutes if you need that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Sean Bolton. You may all remember me from items such as 2618 earlier today. I moved to Toronto in 1987 to attend what was then known as Ryerson Polytechnical Institute. On the first day of class, I remember riding in from Parkdale on the 506 and walking down Yonge Street, passing by those iconic spinning discs of the Sam the Record Man sign, and rounding the corner onto Gould. And when I reached campus and walked around for the first time, I saw Lake Devo and Kerr Hall and Jorgensen Hall. Unfortunately, today it's all about Monty Hall. Let's make a deal. I'm surprised this discussion is happening, and yet somehow I'm not surprised at all. Anyone paying even a little bit of attention could have and should have seen that this is exactly how this was going to turn out. Let's make a deal? No thanks. We already have one. The staff report notes that Ryerson and their signage expert and their architect have raised a series of concerns, problems that make it less than ideal for them to meet their commitment to restore and reinstall a sign. For example, the sign apparently conflicts with the design of the new Student Learning Center. That's unfortunate, but the time to address that problem was while the Student Learning Center was being designed. We had a deal. The sign will be costly to operate and maintain. That's unfortunate, but the time to address that problem is during Ryerson's annual budgeting process or as part of its ongoing fundraising campaign. We had a deal. The sign would damage the facade of the library building. That's unfortunate, but the time to address that problem was before agreeing as part of the easement agreement, a legal contract, by the way, that it would be the secondary site on which to install the sign. We had a deal. I could go on, but I'm sure you see there's a pattern developing here. Many of these problems could have been foreseen, and the ones that couldn't have been foreseen could have been planned for once they were uncovered. And, oh yeah, we had a deal. Look, this is a pretty straightforward situation. The city lived up to their commitment, and now Ryerson's trying to beg off theirs after they've torn down the building and are well on their way to having the replacement built. If a contract involves offer, acceptance, and consideration, then Ryerson has received their consideration, but they're being extremely inconsiderate to the city in return. You know, I saw someone make a joke on Twitter the other day. I don't remember who or the exact words, but it was along the lines of, Ryerson doesn't want to put the sign back up. That's fine, but it'd be a shame if something were to happen to those lovely planners blocking off Gould. Now, implicit threat aside, there's a truth there. The city has partnered with Ryerson in helping it create and grow a community downtown. And Ryerson has a responsibility to give back to that community in return. Now, I'm not a heritage expert. I respect that staff is trying to be pragmatic and find a solution to this problem. But I'm not bound by pragmatism. As a taxpayer, I'm disappointed that the city would even consider not forcing Ryerson to do the right thing here. And as an alumnus of Ryerson, I'm disgusted that they'd need to be forced. It's unconscionable. I'm sure the commemorative insert they're proposing for the sidewalk might be lovely. And if this were the beginning of the process back in 2007 or 2008, it might even have been worth considering. But it's not the beginning. It's hardly even the middle anymore. And if council ever again wants someone who makes a commitment, however reluctantly, to the people of this city to live up to that commitment, this is a precedent that you cannot afford to set. And you especially can't afford to set that precedent with regard to heritage protection. It is too important. We had a deal. In fact, strike that. We have a deal, and we need you to enforce it. I'm not interested in trading it for what's behind door number 3, and I hope that you're not either. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Questions for Mr. Bolton from the committee? No, thank you very much for appearing before us today. Next, Julia Hanigsberg from Vice President Admin, Ryerson University. Sorry, are you together on this?
are, yeah.
And you are?
I'm Erin Meehan, so a little bit later, I'm placing Bruce.
Oh, you want to go together here?
Yeah, yeah.
Sure. Okay. Are you going to be each taking 5 minutes?
We will,
Yes?
yes.
Okay. That's fine. You have your beginning, Ms.
Thank you
Julie.
very much, Madam Chair. I am here joined by my colleague Erin McGinn, who is going to be speaking to the visual representation you're seeing on the boards behind you now. But I'm going to be starting to speak on behalf of Ryerson University in support of the staff report that you have before you. In addition to Erin McGinn, we have a number of other individuals from Ryerson, including representative from our architects, our legal counsel you've already met, Michael Brooks, as well as our heritage architect, who are all here prepared to answer any questions you might have. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to come speak with you today. The commemoration strategy that city staff are recommending is a celebration of the site of the original Sam the Record Man store on Yonge Street, the Sam sign, and the rich cultural heritage created by the store and by Sam Snyderman. We share with the deputants that have preceded us enormous respect and excitement for the extraordinary role that this part of Yonge Street played in the history and heritage of music in this city, in this country. And we think that by extension, the proposal in the staff report that we support is really, by extension, a celebration of the rich musical heritage and legacy of the entire downtown Yonge Street. This commemorative strategy contains 3 components that are outlined in the staff report. First of all, Ryerson will continue to carefully store the original Sam sign and will support city staff to find an appropriate location where that original sign can be erected. Secondly, we propose a vibrant and exciting commemorative insert that will be installed on the Yonge Street sidewalk at the precise location where the store once stood. This insert will include images commemorating the sign itself, text explaining the history and importance of the store, and an interpretive plaque. And I direct you to page 8 of the staff report, which gives you a sense of the size and scale of that commemoration and how impactful we believe it will be on the enormous number of pedestrians who walk on that part of Yonge Street. We have also launched what we're going to talk more to you about and what you have behind you, which is a website called Music on Yonge Street, celebrating 70 years of Sam's. Like many of you, I have warm memories of the Sam the Record Man store. One of my first jobs was as a cashier at Sam's, and I know Sam Snyderman loved hearing those stories when he met people. I certainly wasn't the first person to tell him it was my first job when I met him. I think you heard it all the time. And many of us remember the Boxing Day lineups, and we remember those things very fondly. At Ryerson, we believe that the proposed commemoration will not only give those of us with memories of a store a reminder of what was there before, but also will give new generations, including the many young people and newcomers to our city who have no recollection of the Sam's store, a real understanding of what was there, its importance, its historical context as part of the Yonge Street music scene, and a real sense of the magnitude of the impact that was made by the Snyderman family on the music industry in Canada. This is a great stretch of Yonge Street that the university and our students call our home, and we are immensely proud to be able to continue the legacy of the Sam's store through this commemoration plan. I think that the Community Council would accept that Ryerson is a tremendous city builder for this city, tremendously respectful of heritage. Our repurposing, redevelopment of Maple Leaf Gardens, I think, is a good indication of the degree to which we respect heritage in this city and celebrate it and see ourselves as being a part of commemoration of heritage. I want to extend very sincere thanks to city staff and especially to Mary McDonald for the collaborative working relationship that we have had in addressing this issue. And I also want to thank our councillor, Kristen Wong-Tam, for her collaboration, her enormous engagement over a very long period of time, and her advice and leadership. And with that, I'd like to turn to my colleague, Erin McGinn, to discuss the website.
Thank you very much, Julia, and members of council. So what you have on the screens behind you, and I'm sorry you don't have it, the room just doesn't lend itself too well to it. It's about the tribute site that we've created to Sam, and as well Young Street and the history of music on Young. It's an attempt to bring alive the history to a digital age for those who have very real memories of Sam's, but also those that don't. And most of the content of the site has never been made public before, and much of it was material that was written and developed exclusively for the site. So the first page, hopefully it works here. There we are. So one of the many exciting things about the site is some pieces that we commissioned with Peter Goddard of the Toronto Star, and one of Canada's most renowned music writers and critics. And he spent months on this piece and was very excited to be part of it. He's also personal friends with the Snyderman family and spoke to them, as well as Sam himself, for the site. Here as well, we have a spot on the site called the Historical Corner, if you wouldn't mind finding that for Mustawa. And this is content that has never been made public before, and it is one of our research librarians investigated the rich musical history of Young and Gould, dating back to 100 years when there was sheet music and the evolution to live music, and then as well to A&A and Sam's. The next link is to the site, the signs themselves, and this has neat and interesting facts about the signs themselves, and that there were two signs, they weren't built at the same time, 7.5 meters wide and 8 meters high. So those are just some interesting facts. One of the other elements of the site is in pictures, and these are pictures in an attempt that we were able to secure, but also people can share with us about their own memories of Sam's, as well as Young Street. And we have some more current things relative to when Sam Snyderman received an honorary doctorate from Ryerson University, as well as when he received a volunteerism award from the Governor General. The last part I wanted to share with you was the section on memories, and this is where we are asking people to share with us their memories of Sam's, and then it will get posted on the site. So it's designed to be interactive. And so that's just a quick overview of one of the component parts of the commemorative plan.
Thank you. Do you have more? Or are you finished?
That's it.
You're finished. Okay, there's some questions, I think. Go ahead, Councillor Mihevik.
Yes, the previous speaker, I think Sean Bolton, gave a very strong argument. I'm wondering if you could, a deal is a deal. There were opportunities for you to incorporate the records into previous construction, into current construction. Why didn't you go that route?
I think the clearest answer to that is that we agreed to the deal, and we think that it is important to continue to work to find an appropriate site and a site that will work well for this. I wasn't actually in the role I'm in now at the time, so I'm not speaking from personal memory at the time. But my understanding is that the deal came together quickly as a result of public interest at the time and Kyle Ray's support at the time. And that many of the issues, in fact, all of the issues that we went to experts to understand better, those issues that are explained well in the staff report, were things that we did not know at the time, couldn't know at the time, and those subsequent experts made known to us. So it was in the context of having that additional information that we resolved to develop a plan that we thought would achieve what we believe to be among the very strong and important objectives overall of commemoration of the importance of the music industry. And we heard that as well from previous deputants. And that is why we believe that this commemoration plan supports the overall objective behind the designation.
If a motion is moved to try to find an alternate location and that Ryerson be subject to that, can you in good faith say that you will try to find an alternative location? within a certain time frame, and what would that time frame be?
Absolutely, and I'll defer to Councillor Wong-Tam because I think she has amendments that speak to timeframe coming up shortly. Absolutely, we have, over the past number of days and weeks, actually been hearing from people who have suggestions about locations. And we would very much welcome, and have already been in communication with city staff around working together to locate an appropriate place for the signs that would meet city staff's and heritage appreciation of what the proper kind of location would be. And we would absolutely support that. We are keeping the sign. The sign has been very carefully taken apart and stored, expertly stored, and it is being, and it will be kept until such time as we have a resolution with the city that everyone's comfortable with.
Councillor Matwell.
When Ryerson first agreed to the initial agreement before negotiations began with city staff on changing the terms, just like buying a house or buying a car, where you would assess the maintenance, what kind of costs might go into it, for example, before you do a purchase. Did Ryerson not essentially kick the tires a bit and just get a sense of whether or not there'd be costs that they would have to incur, take a look at the condition of the sign, have a better understanding of what they were walking into, before formally agreeing to protect, preserve, and remount the sign at its location or nearby?
If I just want to make sure I understand the question, if I understand the question, you're asking about the nature of the due diligence that Ryerson undertook prior to entering into the agreement with the city
And the
of
context,
Toronto.
the context of the question is, all of a sudden there seemed to be, oh my gosh, we've got to deal with environmental concerns or cost concerns or design concerns. Before signing on the dot that you were willing to do what you, when I say you, your institution committed to do, why wouldn't you have known some of these matters, these facts, these issues before going and signing an agreement and making a deal with the city to protect the signs and remount them in its original location or nearby?
I don't have personal recollection at the time, so I can't offer you anything in that regard. What I can say is that over the course of the time that the sign was dismantled and stored, and in seeking the expert advice that we have and in consulting with heritage architects, the facts that are before you are what we uncovered and what we've been responding to. So at all times there was good faith on Ryerson's part. There continues to be good faith. We continue to want to find a proper location for the sign, and we will store and restore the sign appropriately in order for it to be reinstalled. And that continues to be our desire. But the elements that are described in the staff report were elements that became known to us over the course of the time that the signs were in storage and that we were examining them.
With all due respect, though, is that not Ryerson's problem rather than Toronto's problem or the Toronto's public's problem with regard to these issues that you discovered? If it's going to cost Ryerson more, so be it. If it's going to take some type of discipline, investment to get this done, so be it. But isn't that you holding up your end of the deal rather than having to renegotiate with the City of Toronto to essentially capitulate and say, well, it looks like a fantastic website. Like, don't get me wrong, it looks awesome, and I will spend time on it. And a plaque is great, and there should be a plaque there anyway, a descriptive plaque. But you do understand that for many people who do recognize the historical value of this sign, that doesn't replace actually having it in the location that your institution formally agreed to protect.
I suppose if I'm pulling a question out of your comments, I would say this, that we see this as a collaborative process between the university and the city. We don't see ourselves as in opposition to either the public or to city council or to city staff. Very much this has been an item that we've been in discussion with over a very long period of time, talking about different options. So we don't see this as a matter of whose problem it is. We see it as a matter of we have an objective around the respect and commemoration of important heritage sites. How can we do that in an effective way? How can we commemorate something very significant that happened in this part of Yonge Street? And we think we have a solution here, and we have worked very well with city staff, who as well are convinced that we have a solution here.
To conclude, my question wasn't rhetorical, nor was it a comment. Do you understand so many members of our public's concerns about replacing what had been committed to them, the sign, essentially where it was or right nearby, with some type of website and some plaque and some commemoration? Do you understand the concerns? Do you empathize with those concerns? Is there any interest to respond to those concerns directly, rather than say, well, we had problems, so we had to go back to the city to deal with our problems? My initial question was, why should it be our problem? Why is it not solely yours?
Yeah, I think without wanting to take issue with the question, because that's not very productive, we see this as a way, we see this as working together with the city and working collaboratively with individuals who also care about heritage and care about this part of Yonge Street, about which we care enormously. We live here every day. This is our home. This is our students' home. We're a community of 50,000 people who live on this corner. So we care deeply about it. We have experts among our students and faculty who are extremely knowledgeable about the musical heritage of the city. So we absolutely empathize with those people for whom the sign itself as an object has meaning. There are differences of opinion on that, but absolutely people, all of whom have shared objectives and shared extraordinary respect for what we are each trying to do, can disagree about that.
I respectfully disagree with you, but thank you.
Thank you. Any other questioners? Councillor Wong-Tam?
Yes, thank you very much.
No.
There was a mention about Councillor Ray's, former Councillor Ray's previous role, and I see in the list of correspondence and communication that he has a letter dated August the 23rd, where it seems to me he's having almost a sober second thought. He's now writing in support of Ryerson's, he's writing in support of Ryerson's request to modify the agreement. Obviously, we are here today largely because of Councillor Ray and his advocacy to keep that sign on the street. He was a councillor in the neighborhood for 19, almost 20 years. Can you explain, or have you had conversations with former Councillor Ray on why he's now had this change of heart?
I have. I think he expresses his views very clearly in his very detailed letter. I think there are a couple of things that have impressed him over time in thinking about this. One is in the first paragraph of his letter. He talks about his belief that it is unfair to impose upon a new property owner the signage of a previous property owner. And he thinks that is something that he would have thought differently about now with hindsight. The other thing is that he very much shares the views of those who care deeply about the rich cultural heritage of the neighborhood, shares with Ryerson that view, but sees the proposal as one that will very effectively commemorate. As well, he sees the environmental concerns that we have described, the safety concerns that our experts have shared with us to be important. He talks about in his letter the time of the announcement. I'll just read from the letter. He says that the announcement of the closure of the Sam the Record Man store, there was an outpouring of concern. There was an active letter-writing campaign. He discussed the matter with staff of the Preservation Board. He, I think at that time was, it was the early days of social media. It was one of those first, I think, Facebook-type petitions that a councillor had to address, and all of those things led him to the decision he made at that time. But he now believes that the concerns that we have raised, and with which city staff concur, and the proposal that we have collectively come to is the more proper way to proceed, and he supports us in that regard.
So in Mr. Ray's letter, he states that the technology is extremely dated. In fact, the previous owner failed to maintain the sign by replacing burnt-out tubes During a Young Street revitalization program in the mid-1990s, the city was compelled to make a grant to the owner to maintain his sign. Subsequently, in the newspaper today, I think, or yesterday, the Toronto Star, there was an article by Laura Kane, who talked about the Merkel brothers being able to restore the sign. And certainly that contradicts the report that came from Ryerson's experts. There seems to be some conflicting data before us, some information. I'd like some clarity on that, please.
I can only share with you what we have been told by our experts, and we consulted experts in this regard. What we understand is that it is a very energy inefficient sign. To restore it would involve using hazardous substances and would involve creating a hazard that we would have to deal with over time. So this was not a sign that was maintained over time, that was in good working order when it was removed. It was not in good working order at the time that it was removed. And we're dealing with something that has those qualities to it. I think it might be a different case if, there have been references to signage in other jurisdictions. If you had signage that had been well maintained over time and was in good working order, that might make a difference to the opinion that an expert would have about the ability to effectively remount a sign and for it to not pose the kind of hazards that our experts have informed us of.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's other questioners. Councillor Layton.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And through you, I just have a couple of questions. In the staff report, it references that you looked at some alternatives, but we only have really one presented here. Can we hear about some of the other ones? Specifically, I'm wondering if what other alternative locations were looked at. It references a second one, but in addition to that, were others and alternative technologies. I don't know if heritage folks would disagree, but I understand the health impacts and energy impacts of the dated technology, but we've done a little bit better with light technology in the last couple of years. Some people at Ryerson may in fact be doing some of that research that could look at different options. So can you explore with us some of the alternatives that you looked at?
Sure. Just off the top of my head, we did explore whether the sign could be put indoors, for example, and have less, environmental impact in terms of, weather-related conditions. And that was determined to be unsafe, for indoor environmental factors. We looked at whether the sign could be itself mounted in the sidewalk, somehow inlaid into the sidewalk, surfaced in some regard, so that the original sign would still be captured without posing some of the dangers. Again, that was, our experts told us, would not be feasible, would not, particularly in the weather conditions of Canada, would not withstand the kind of climate we have. The suggestion you make about new technology being employed is absolutely true. I mean, a lot of what we think of as neon signage, the style of neon signage that we see in other jurisdictions, in fact, isn't neon anymore. LED lights and other kind of electrical solutions have been used very effectively in large-scale signage. That isn't the original sign. That's another thing. That's another form of commemoration. So I wouldn't take any issue with your statement that there are other forms of signage that are, developed over time, but that is not, in fact, the technology, and that's not, in fact, the sign itself that we have, that we are storing.
So you didn't look at employing some other type of technology?
No.
And with respect to location, you didn't go off, like you kept it on that particular site? You didn't look at, say, like Dundas Square that has a lot of light stuff going on there already?
We haven't had those discussions with Dundas Square. I mean, I think looking at what the staff report is recommending, those are exactly the kinds of things that we would be doing going forward. We would be looking at the different alternatives for locations, working with city staff in particular around what sort of locations they would deem to be appropriate. We know from our heritage architect that where the sign is actually located is an important part of how you commemorate something, that you can't just place it anywhere and expect it to have ongoing heritage value. So we would be working with city staff who have that expertise to help us to understand what locations they would consider appropriate in order to satisfy the recommendations that you see in the staff report.
120 years ago, they moved the scatting cabin clear across town, and it clearly has significant heritage value still today.
What did they move?
What's the rush to,
We had 2 locations.
what's the rush to like, is there a date that we're working towards? Is there a drop dead date that you need us to release you from the agreement? Or, like, it seems to me like some of these other things to explore, like alternative technologies, perhaps, while the sign in and of itself might be nice, it's gonna have to get replaced or every couple of years. It might be best to do a refurbishment that could stand the test of time. And I certainly know that newer technologies tend to have to be replaced less often, as well as use less energy and are less toxic. Maybe some of that investment now, while it's not the original sign, might be an appropriate alternative to look at.
It's an appropriate alternative commemoration plan.
Sure. But this would release you from your requirements to actually do that work. Is there a timeline that's so specific that we have to decide today, or is there an option for us to explore along with the partners? Maybe there are other partners in the neighborhood that might allow us to come up with a more suitable alternative than a plaque?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, the exploring with alternative partners is what's contemplated in the report before you, and is what's contemplated by Ryerson. There is timing sensitivity, and that's because we are in the process of, we are in construction, as you know. We need to be able to finalize the city planning permissions related to the public realm around the building, and that's all happening now. And if we have delay on that, it will have very, very significant impacts in terms of construction schedule and construction cost. And I certainly could have our architects answer that, who are here today, answer that in more detail if you wish.
Okay.
Anyone else? Anna?
Just a quick question. What is stopping Ryerson to have those conversations with other partners around and exploring other technologies still with the agreement in place? I mean, I think it'd be easier for all of us, councillors, to have all that done prior to releasing of the agreement.
As I just mentioned, there is a very serious timing issue in terms of where
What's
we
the
are on
time
the
issue?
construction.
6 months, 1 year, 2 months?
It's a site plan approval. So it's a very significant timing issue. And like I said, I'm happy to have our architects give you more detail on that, and they're here today to speak to that. So there is, those conversations are ongoing. People are emailing us and giving us their suggestions. We want to continue to work with city staff, and will work with city staff because they have the expertise that we can work together to define that sort of location, what they consider to be an appropriate commemorative location. So there is nothing that prevents us from doing that. We will do that, but the current easement prevents us in moving on with the site plan approval that we need.
I understand that, but by us allowing you out of the deal, it also prevents you from looking into different technologies to have the sign placed in that location, because you get your site plan approval for that and you move on. Basically, that's what you're telling us, is that you can't have it in that location, even though that other technologies might facilitate having the sign at that location.
So to be clear, I actually did not say that. I want to be very clear about that. That location is not one that can be facilitated even with new technology. What I said in response to Councillor Layton's question is that absolutely, as a form of commemoration, the use of alternative technology is something that could be explored. And we'd be happy to do that, but that would not make the sign appropriate to be reinstalled in its current location.
Why not?
Because of the design issues and the other issues that are already referenced in the report.
Thank you. Anyone else? I do have a few questions myself. On your website there, that you said you'd had all this copy written, Mr. Jennings is probably Toronto's premier music writer. Did he write your copy? Who wrote the copy for your website about Sam's and Canadian
Sorry,
music?
the copy.
For your website?
Oh,
which
Peter
you-
Goddard.
Pardon?
Peter Goddard,
Peter Goddard, and he is a well-known music.
Toronto Star reporter. So he is a foremost Canadian journalist on Canadian music.
Okay, thank you. I just want to go over the sequence of how things happened. Back at when this first went through in 2008, the city had, or 2007, we were dealing with this, there was a an intention to designate this sign. Do I have that right?
You do.
So within your, we had an intention to designate this sign, and instead of a designation, you agreed to commit in the easement agreement to restore and reinstall the signage on either the Ryerson Young lands or the Ryerson Library lands. Do I have that right? So there was no intention that the designation didn't take place. Instead, it was sorted out in an easement agreement that the sign would be stored, restored, and reinstalled in either of those two places.
We don't take issue with anything that's in the staff report. What you see in the staff report, we agree
I
with.
understand. And so then you're now, I just want to be clear how I am at this point in time, that you've indicated that the approval of your site plan is now dependent on resolving this because you can't find a way to put the sign on either of those two places. How long have you been working on your site plan?
Mike, do you want to come up to the mic so they can understand you? This is Mike Smith, who is one of our architects, and
I
he's
just
better able to
asked
answer the
you.
question than I can, so I don't want to give you
Can't tell me
misinformation.
how long? How long has the site plan been under
Well, the
discussion?
original site plan, yeah, I guess we began a couple of years ago with the
Well,
regular
what is a
permit.
couple of years? I'm asking you when it was,
I don't recall exactly, but it would be about 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
2 or 3 years
2
ago.
or 3 years ago. So city staff would know exactly when you came in to start those site plan discussions. So within the 2 or 3 years, this is the first time that this has been determined to be a problem? Had you
We've been
have
working.
trouble understanding how you've been
No,
at
we've
it
been
for 3
working with the
years?
counselor, her office, with office staff in Heritage for, I mean, again, I don't have the dates in front of me. The first time we met with the council on this, we've probably been talking about this for a year and a half. So while it's the first time that has come before Toronto and East York Community Council, we have been, in fact, discussing this issue with the city for a very long time. So it's not the first time it has surfaced as an issue for discussion.
So do you have site plan design where it's included in the site plan?
No,
In
it's
the
not.
locations where it's supposed to be?
No, because we were waiting for this, to get a resolution on this before we issue for building permits for landscape work. So the rest of the permit is out, but the landscape work is not yet out because this is part of the
We
this is
can't
this
hear
is
you.
part of the landscape proposal. So that comes later. That's why it wasn't part of the original permit submissions.
But you must have anticipated that that was a major piece, since, did you not anticipate this?
We didn't know
Site
that,
plan?
we didn't know at that time that the sidewalk commemoration would be a solution.
No, I'm not asking that. I'm asking if you anticipated where and how you were going to restore and reinstall that sign at the beginning of your site plan process? Or had you intended from the beginning not to restore and reinstall the sign? That's, I guess, the real question here.
We had no resolution and we needed the time to work on it.
I'm sorry, it's very, could you put his microphone up, please? We cannot hear in this room. It's very frustrating for everybody. I'm sorry, and not yakking when we're working. Not vacuuming. Oh, my God. Just go over to my house and then come back later. That's good. Sorry, what was it you were saying? My question was, did you not anticipate that? Or were you intending from the beginning not to have to anticipate that within your site plan approval?
We weren't sure what the solution would be and whether or not it would be something that would be incorporated in the landscape outside or inside the building. So we proceeded with the regular permits without a solution yet for the SAM sign.
So you don't have anything inside the building? Do you have any drawings where you're trying to put it inside the building?
We have early sketch, we just looked at locations for it. It's a very large sign. It's 38 by 48 feet. It's very hard to find any surface within the building that would accommodate a sign that large. It's pretty obvious that to us from early review that we would have trouble accommodating a sign that large.
Did you, I'm just back now to you, Ms. Hersey. Did you not know the size of the sign when you agreed to this easement?
We did know the size of the sign, yes.
And so did you not have any technical advice as to how that could be managed at that point?
As you
Or
could-
a requirement in the architectural work that was undertaken on behalf of Ryerson?
The process for looking at that was the process that was engaged in with our consultant team, including our architects. And so all of that was explored through the design process. So of course, none of that was determined by Ryerson in advance of the design process. But absolutely, the alternatives were looked at as there were some early sketches, as was indicated, around putting something in the floor. As I mentioned, we had some, as in response to Councillor Layton's question, we looked at other alternatives such as putting the sign in the sidewalk itself, which also would not have been, could easily have accommodated it. So there were many different early looks at it. From the time that we realized that this was going to be a more difficult problem to solve than we had initially anticipated, we entered into discussions with city staff and with the councillor's office. And so we have been in those discussions, as I indicated previously, for now probably more than a year, and have been working towards a resolution that would be consistent with what Heritage staff would be comfortable with, that our councillor felt that she could support, and that's the solution that you see before you today.
Thank you. That's it?
There's another deputy
Oh.
there now.
Oh.
I would love to ask just one question.
Well, maybe he wants to present. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Let's just determine if you have a presentation to make us, and then we would have, I understand. So, thank you. It's so great when you let me chair. It's so wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody. Just, were you planning to make a deputation or simply answer questions?
No, I just asked Mr. Smith to join
So
us to
then
answer your
If you don't
question.
mind, then there are some questions of Mr.
Absolutely.
Smith. Thank you for that, and yes, you're very welcome to proceed with questions.
It was really one question. I think this is the core of what some of my colleagues are wondering. The building wasn't built with putting up the signs in mind, or wasn't designed, conceived of, without that as a central feature?
No, the agreement, I guess, with the city was done before there was any design work done on the building.
That makes it all the more clear. If you knew you had to put the sign, incorporate the sign into the facade of the building.
Yes, we made.
That wasn't taken into account in the design process that you went through as the architecture firm.
No, it was. It's just that, you know, from early on, we could see that we were going to have a difficulty with a sign of that size.
And when was early on?
Well, from the I guess after conceptual design, I guess a year or half a year into the project.
And we didn't start seeing options for how we might commemorate in a more appropriate fashion at that time?
We did at that time. That's in fact, so when Mike describes that time frame, that would be approximately a year after we entered into the agreement with the city. So it was shortly, really after that time, that we entered into the discussions we've been in with the city to discuss various alternatives. And we have been in those discussions for a lengthy period of time.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Matlow.
Madam Chair, I asked a question earlier about, whether or not there was any due diligence done at all to determine any kind of cost, maintenance issues, environmental concerns before actually signing the deal with the city. Can you demonstrate to us in any way that there is ever any intent to mount the sign on the new design of the property?
From the time that Ryerson entered into the agreement, our intent was to honor the agreement as we do all of our legal obligations. There was never an intent to walk away from any agreement. As we went through the design process, looking at what was the best approach to meet the needs of that corner, to bring the design excellence to that is part of our commitment to our master plan, to the City of Toronto, to look at all the features that we're going to make a truly excellent building on that
I
corner.
don't care about design excellence in this context. I mean, of course we want it to be excellence, but that's not...
Yep.
hold on for a
I'm
moment.
getting there, Councilor Perkins.
I just want to step away from the understandable hyperbole when you want to boast about a building that you're proud of. What I'm asking is, can you demonstrate that there was any intent to mount the sign on that building? I know you want to build a great building, but it just seems from everything you've said, not from what anyone's inferred or assumed, but from what you've said, that you've gone ahead with the process to design a building that you're going to love and you're going to be proud of, that the sign had no part of. Can you demonstrate to us right now that you actually intended on putting the sign up?
I'm not sure what it would
Anyway.
take to demonstrate. I don't know what that would mean.
Councilor Matlow, can you let the deputant just answer that, please? Please.
I would say that we had always intended, and the fact that we've been working closely with staff over this period of time, looking at how to approach alternative locations, the willingness we have to do all of this is an indication of the respect we have for the process and our, in fact, intention to work together to find an approach that will be consistent with the overall objectives. So yes, the answer is from the beginning, our intention was to meet the obligations that we undertook.
What did you do?
Are you finished?
No.
No.
What steps
I'm
were
asking
taken?
if she's finished with her answer. Didn't appear that you were finished.
I'm not sure that I have an answer that will satisfy the counselor, but I
haven't
think
heard
I've
an
given as complete an answer as I can.
Okay, thank you. She's
I,
kind of a stalemate
I'm
here.
trying to, what I'm trying to establish is,
Last question,
what I'm
Councilor.
trying to establish is, and I genuinely, like I say this in all sincerity, I don't believe I've actually heard an actual answer to my question. I haven't heard it at least. So I'll say it as clearly as possible, and I apologize to you if I haven't
this
been
a
as clear
question?
as possible.
Is it a question?
Can you demonstrate, can you tell us, what steps did you take? What did you do to try to get that sign back up on a new building that you were going to build?
Okay.
We, for instance, we looked at placing the signs in the roof on the mechanical penthouse at the top of the building. That was one location that we studied. We looked at looking at the north facade of the building. Problem there is that eventually buildings will be built to the north of the building that would block it. We looked at all the available space on all of the elevations. There's also the option of putting the building on the existing library facade on Gould Street. We looked at that option and we mocked up some options for that. But we found that it was too remote from Yonge Street and really wouldn't make a lot of sense. So I think we looked at probably every possibility for the exterior of the building.
Excuse me.
I have more questions, but I know we have limited time. So
No, there's
thank-
more deputants. You might get to ask some of those. Thank you very much. Unless there's more questions, there aren't. Thank you very much. Next deputant is actually from Ryerson again. It's Bruce Piercy, the Director of Communication. Oh, okay, fine. So that's done. All right. I have on the list Kurt Swinghammer, Jane Bennett, Keith Mackay, and there may be. Is there anyone else here? Would you all like to come and sit together? Yes, please. You have 5 minutes to address our committee, should you need 5. And I'm just going to add, we can't hear you very well, so either pull that close.
Check, testing.
Okay.
There we go.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. I'm here to express my concern that Ryerson University is trying to change its plans to restore the SAM sign. This piece is recognized by many Torontonians as an iconic landmark that transcends mere retail signage. While it is a fantastic example of 60s pop art-inspired modern design, it more importantly represents the significant impact of Canadian music at home and indeed the entire world. Yonge Street deserves to have a monument to acknowledge its rich history of music. Music that not only reflected the times, but made a contribution to the very vocabulary of popular culture. The SAM sign would be a perfect monument, and it is a wonderful opportunity for Ryerson to honor the street and the culture. Toronto so often has destroyed its heritage, and this is an opportunity to save a piece of it. And just after hearing the folks from Ryerson, they make it sound like it's a burden to preserve this and to keep it in its original location. And I think its location is very important. It's a landmark. But I see it as a gift. It's an incredible opportunity for them to have it become part of what they represent and become part of their visual brand. Even it's I would see it as a gift. Thank you.
Any questions of Mr. Swinghammer? No, thank you very much. Jane Bennett, 5 minutes to address our.
Thank you. I'm just a lowly jazz musician. But I have to say that Sam Snyderman was, to so many people, not only in this city, but right across Canada, one of the most important people, not only in business, but in culture. And I think that if that sign does not go up as it was intended when Sam Snyderman sold the property to Ryerson with the intention that it was to go either on Yonge Street or on Gould Street, that this is a total insult to the music industry all over Canada. It sends out a message to the students of Ryerson, Ryerson being known for its great business courses, that it's okay to renege on a deal. And it's not. A plaque has, as we all know, where people are walking, either on the street, does not have sufficient resonance as that sign did. That sign was a landmark. It was a place that musicians from even, the US, all over the world, recognized that sign. It is clearly iconic to our city. Because of Sam's store, because of the music, me spending my Saturdays there pretty much all day, going from the main floor, getting the Beatles, and then going up to the top floor for the jazz, and just getting it all. I spent so much time there. It was like my library, my home away from home. Because of that store, I've received an Order of Canada for my work in music. I've received an honorary doctorate for my work in music from Queen's University. And I've received 5 Junos and 2 Grammy nominations. And I have more respect for Sam Snyderman and that store, 90%, I love the man. He took, I know so many musicians from reggae, from very, even, polka player, with his accordion. Sam would take one, he wouldn't take 20, he'd take 2 or 3 of these musicians' records, but he never refused anybody. If they made music, he never refused any of these musicians to have a place in his store. You use Peter Goddard as one of your, in your back pocket, but Peter Goddard doesn't even live in Toronto anymore. So I don't find, I don't see that as your secret weapon. The PowerPoint presentation was very nice, and that's a great idea. And I think if you did that also, that'd be pretty nice too. But you had a deal, as Sean said. You had a deal. And the deal that Sam sold that property was that sign was going to be outside the building, either on Yonge or on Gould. And I just think it's shocking. And I think if the city does not, if they cooperate with this, I'm disgusted that they get let out of this deal that was set. So I don't think I have too much more to say, except I think they probably started to have difficulty with the design after Sam died. Because if Sam was here right now, the deal would be over, I'm sure of it. He'd say, forget it, man. It's not happening. So I don't have anything more to say.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I just have one question. What I'm hearing you say, Ms. Bennett, is that to Ryerson, it might be a hardware that they have to place, but for the music community, this sign is more than a sign. It has a much greater meaning to
Yeah,
the industry
I
itself.
totally agree with Kurt. They're getting a gift. I think if York University was building if the deal had gone down with York University or UFT, you'd see that sign incorporated because there's a initiative in those universities for music and culture, and I just feel Ryerson is just sending out a really terrible message in terms of culture in this city. And once again, I mean, I keep running into people that come down to Toronto and they don't even recognize Yonge Street anymore. It doesn't, the Dundas, Yonge and Dundas, it does not look like the same place it used to look. And like, are we just going to go totally generic in this whole city? Like, let's keep a few things that have some heart and soul. And that sign had soul, and it's a soul to our city.
Are you surprised that none of that is in this report? In other
Absolutely.
words, there's nothing from the culture division in the city, which we're talking.
What do you mean, that there's not supporters?
Well, no, in our staff report, that we're simply looking at that. That isn't taken into account, the iconic cultural piece.
Yes, I don't think they care. I don't think they recognize, because that's not their agenda.
Yeah,
They-
I'm
they-
talking about the city's report, not Ryerson, but that we should have addressed that in the city's report.
I think so. Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Mackay?
I'm also a musician. I've played in Toronto for many years. I came from Sault Ste. Marie, where you're originally from, Paula.
You did.
I hope that you won't hold that against me. I don't have much to add because everything I would have said has already been said by pretty much everyone that said something about it. But I do believe that when I first read about the deal years ago in the paper, I wondered whether it would ever get done. And unfortunately, there's a lot of cynicism now with how deals are made. Ryerson, I believe, should have an ethical attitude towards any deal they make, and they should rise to challenges. The challenge being that if they didn't incorporate it into their design, why couldn't they have incorporated it into their design? Perhaps maybe use a different kind of lighting, maybe replace neon with something that looks like neon, which would have been exactly the same thing. If it gives the effect of what was there, the visual would do. The colors on Yonge Street, if you notice a lot of the streets in the city, I play a lot of long-term care facilities now, and a lot of the city seems to be glass doors and steel, and that's beautiful in its own way, but a little color is wonderful, especially near our Times Square, which is that area around there. It kind of actually adds to the area, and I think a lot of people would say that. I have nothing else to add because everything's been said that I would have said, so.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Mackay? Thank you very much for taking the time to come down today to address the committee. Are there any other citizens here that wish to address the committee on this matter before we discuss it amongst ourselves? No? So we will now bring this into, pardon me, oh, sorry, thank you. Here comes another deputant.
Badly broken knee, I can't sit down, so
Oh,
which one
okay.
do I use?
Just pull that up, close, straighten it, and put on the button there.
Right.
That's-
I knew that
is
they were
the button
going to
on?
be.
Is the
Pardon?
button on? Yep.
Okay, I knew that there were going to be all kinds of musicians here, but I'm also a musician. I met Sam when I was 12 or 13 years old. I was at St. Michael's Choir School. He got to know most of the boys because that's where we used to go to get the Beatles after we did Gregorian chant all frickin' day. Now, I haven't looked like this most of my life. In grade 5, Miss Mann said that if I know you got a haircut, you waited too long. And that's the way I was, right through corporate, right up until about 10 years ago. The last time I met Sam, they had a place at the Toronto Carpet Factory. They had an office there. So he remembered me when I was like 12 or 13 years old, used to throw the occasional record to us. And then when you were 16 and 17 years old, Sam used to impress your girlfriend by, you'd walk in, and all of a sudden, she'd have something in her hand for nothing. That made you a big man, and, you know, like, and then in your 20s, he still remembered you. He remembered me in my early 40s, and the last time I met him, he still remembered me in my late 40s. So he'd be disgusted with this. This was one of the kindest, most generous men I've ever met in my life. He had a great interest in Canadian music, but that included St. Michael's Choir School. And now what we're seeing is that all the kids coming from St. Michael's Choir School, coming up Yonge Street, are going to miss that sign. I don't want them to miss that damn sign. That was very, very important to us. Sure, we went into A&A too, but those 3 floors were very, very, very important to us. That's where we got, you know, and then when your musical, changed, your taste changed, Sam was the place, because, man, you could find stuff there that was just bizarre. So, please, all they've done, I mean, I can't believe these guys. If they need somebody to take care of the environmental problem, I'll call up MIT and I'll see if they can take care of it, or I'll call Montreal and ask a university there, or I'll call a couple of architects and see if they want to help with the project, because all I'm hearing is a bunch of experts and geniuses who can't do a simple thing. Like I said to one of the gentlemen over there, we built the Canada Arm. We can fix this.
Yes, you built that at Spar Aerospace. Anyone further? On that note, then we will take this into committee and questions of staff. Who'd like to start? Councillor Mihevc.
Could staff outline the obligations that we imposed upon Ryerson, and whether it was clear and unambiguous that it had to be here, or whether there was any possibility of or whether there was any flexibility in terms of how this would be managed, especially the location piece.
Madam Chair, pursuant to the agreement that was entered into in 2008, the obligation on Ryerson with respect to the agreement was to store it and then refurbish it, and then to place it on the lands that are currently the location of the new student center. And if after using its reasonable best efforts it was unable to do so, then the sign was intended to be located on the Gould Street property of Ryerson, which is known as the Ryerson Library lands under the agreement. And that was to occur within 42 months of the agreement having been entered into. So, in other words, by roughly 2011, February 2012, the sign should have been relocated to the library site. So the agreement was quite clear.
Thank you, Councillor Mihevc. More questions? No. Councillor Matlow.
What responsibility did you have, city staff, to get into negotiations to allow Ryerson to change this deal?
Since the agreement started, we, city staff, heritage staff, were very firm that only satisfying the terms of agreement was the only thing that would satisfy city staff. Mm-hmm. When, I believe it was when the site plan agreement started to be talked about and design started to be considered, some alternative schemes started to float out, and over the last 18 months or so, city staff were consistent in our rejection of anything other than the agreement.
Okay.
A few months ago, at some time over the early summer and then throughout the summer, we received the technical documents to do with the environmental considerations and the safety considerations. And we felt we took the advice of the technical specialists that those considerations were indeed problematic. And so it was only at that point that we began to say that alternatives could be explored, but it was only because of those safety considerations.
Would those, if that information is correct and there are in fact safety considerations, what would it matter if it was on that location with the design actually created to accommodate the sign, or on Gould Street, or at Dundas Square, or at the airport, or elsewhere? What would change?
Well, if those safety considerations are to be understood, and we have no reason to believe based on the specialists that it isn't, then I would think that those considerations would continue to exist.
So why wouldn't we say we've got to resolve any safety concerns? Ryerson needs to pay for it, obviously, because they're the one who got themselves into their own deal. And but the location sticks. What does it matter what location we choose if the safety concerns are the same? Why would we not just say you've got to remain at, you've got to design the building in a way that accommodates the sign?
I guess the question was more, is it feasible to expect that they do replace the signs given the safety considerations? We were indicated that it was simply not possible to do it.
Who demonstrated that it was not possible?
Through Ryerson, through the reports that they commissioned.
So they showed you that it was absolutely impossible to put the sign up according to the designs that they've already settled on, or was it a blank slate, and did they say, okay, if we were going to design it to accommodate the sign, we could work with it, or did they say, according to the designs that we've already chosen that conflict with putting the sign up, it's not going to work?
I'm afraid I don't really understand the question. If you could rephrase it a little bit.
Are they saying that the sign won't work with the design plans that they have today?
That is indeed one of the things that they are saying.
Okay. Would it be different, though? What if they said to you, hypothetically, we're not going to look at the design plans we have now. We're going to design the new structure in a way that will accommodate the sign. Would that be different?
That would be different. It was the environmental considerations we were primarily concerned with.
Based on the plans that they have now?
Well, based on the material that they brought forward in support of their request to change the agreement.
Exactly. So if we are going to protect the integrity of heritage designation, and I know it was a bit of a stretch when we protect the building itself,
and,
but it was,
and it is not currently designated.
I get that, but the whole intent was because there was nothing that actually protected the sign itself. But if we're going to be protecting the integrity of heritage, never mind any one specific designation, but if we agree that the sign is part of our city's heritage, and in one of these rare cases we actually have a signed agreement that it should be protected, it will be protected, why would we let them out of it? Why wouldn't we just say, you know what, you should have looked into this before you signed the agreement. You've got to go back and figure it out, and if you need to redesign your plans in a way that accommodate the sign, so be it. But it's not our problem. Why wouldn't you say that rather than we'll kind of work with you and let you out of this?
Well, essentially that is what we have been saying for a very long period of time.
But why now has that changed?
Because of the technical material that has been supplied to the city and the advice that it is a serious environmental challenge to do this.
So going back again one step, so then why wouldn't we say you need to redesign your structure in a way that these complications won't be a problem? And if you need to spend some more money investing in doing something to protect the sign from leakage or what have you, you've got to do that.
Yes, well, the issue isn't with the design of the proposed building.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is with the stability of the sign itself.
Okay. So why would we not ask them to invest in making the sign more stable?
It was our understanding that that was not feasible.
And we're absolutely convinced that that is absolutely true.
We have not peer-reviewed those reports, so we are going on the, as we often do, of that the people who are licensed to have opinions about things are actually providing true advice.
But ultimately, we don't know conclusively that the sign isn't completely structurally sound. We don't know that they've done everything they can to investigate, actually investing maybe more money, God forbid, but more money into making it more sound and environmentally protected. We don't actually know that they had absolute intention to put the sign up in the first place. We don't know these details, but we're considering letting them out of a deal.
Councillor Matlow, can you just turn?
I just want to make sure they can hear me.
No, they can really hear you. They can hear you. Even over the vacuuming, we can hear you.
I can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing us.
That was it. Councillor Kristen Wong-Tam. Councillor Wong-Tam.
Yes, thank you very much. I've heard conflicting reports about the history around the designation. I just want to dig a little bit deeper. So this question will probably go to heritage preservation. In 2007, who owned the property?
The Snyderman family owned it in 2007.
And when did Councillor Ray move to designate the building?
It was adopted in June 2007, and it was for the sign, not the building.
Okay, the sign only. And at that point in time, I know that there was an application to appeal the heritage designation of the sign. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And who filed the application to appeal the heritage designation for the sign?
The appeal application was filed by the owners at the time, which was the Snyderman family.
Because there's been all sorts of comments about what Mr. Snyderman may or may not have wanted. So I just want to be absolutely clear. So it was the Snyderman family in 2007 that filed the original application, or the original objection and appeal to the designation. So they were willing to fight this at the Conservation Review Board.
Yes, that's true.
And that's just the sign. When did they sell the building?
I don't know the exact date of exchange, but I know that Ryerson entered into the agreement in August of 2008. So it was sometime before that.
If they had intentions to sell the building with the designation of heritage on the sign, why would they care whether or not the sign was designated heritage? Why would an owner care about whether or not their property had heritage designation?
I don't want to presume to know what the owners thought. All I know is that they appealed it being designated.
Okay. This is a question for planning staff. With respect to the Ryerson Student Learning Center and the final report, the rezoning report in 2011, was there any assumption from the city planners, knowing that Ryerson had an undertaking and an agreement with the city to bring back the signs and install it at that corner somewhere, whether it's on the library building or the Ryerson Student Learning Center? Why was the recommendation not to go ahead to bring back the sign at that time?
Through you, Madam Chair. So I actually spoke with great enthusiasm for the building when it did come to council as an architectural landmark. And in that staff report that we brought forward in 2011, staff did acknowledge that it may be not appropriate, given the proposed design of the Ryerson Student Learning Center, to reinstall the signs on the face of the building. So that was actually in the report that came to council at the time.
And so if Ryerson was not to be asked to bring the sign back in the 2011 report, which came to the community council that we are sitting here and which was adopted unanimously by city council, then just wanting to understand, what was supposed to take place afterwards? Where were those signs supposed to go?
Councillor, I'll just jump in. Since the agreement allowed for an alternative location, I think we knew from the outset that it was going to be perhaps a design challenge for the original, for the new student center, although we hoped that it would come back in the original location. But there was an alternative location on the Gould Street Library that would have satisfied the agreement, so it did not mean that the agreement was invalid.
So I want to understand your staff report, because I think there's been a lot of information floating around. Your staff report outlines that it would be permissible or recommended by your department division that City Council go ahead and amend the agreement with Ryerson and permit the commemoration plan as they propose, which is the commemorative plaque on the entrance of their building, the large, interpretive plaques on the sidewalk, in addition to the website. Why do you believe that that is an appropriate commemoration plan versus the signs that everybody loves and has fond memories of?
I think it's fair to say that the city staff and the city's preference would be that the signs come up in the original location. As I said to Councillor Matlow, once the issue of the environmental and safety concerns came into play, then we were left in a situation where I think one of the deputants called it pragmatism, and I think that was something that was true. And so we did work collaboratively with Ryerson to develop a commemoration plan that we felt would do honor to the site. And so, yes, based on the information that we have, that is, you will see our recommendation to support that plan.
Your report, my final question, your report comes with a series of conditions and additional undertakings. Can you explain what those 4 items are?
So the first one is to approve the commemoration plan that has been provided, which consists of a number of elements. One is the website. Another is an insert of the Sam the Record Man sign into the sidewalk space in front of the original position of the store. And the colors of it do not come through in the staff report, but it tries to match the colors of the original sign with a vibrant red. And then an interpretive plaque at that location to explain what that means. And there are also written inserts in the ground. Now, we have that in fairly specific detail, but there's some final drawings that would need to be worked out. So it is still it's firm, but still conceptual in the sense that we don't have the measured drawings of all of that. And so what you will see is the requirement that they provide a plan that integrates all of those elements and provides the appropriate drawings. And we're securing a letter of credit which would ensure that the city has assurance that this would be done. If work was not done, the city would be able to do it themselves. We've asked Ryerson to continue to store the signs for a period of no less than 2 years while they continue to work on finding alternative locations. One of the really important things, we did not want the sign to just be lost. So we wanted to ensure that that search continued for an appropriate location. And again, with the environmental considerations, appropriate location may not be putting it up and having the neon working, but it could involve installation where it did not have those elements. So you could be a little bit, you could deal with the signs a little bit differently in another location. And finally, the final condition recommendation is the authorization of the release. And all of these things would be secured within the site plan agreement, an amended site plan agreement. We currently already do have site plan agreement for the Ryerson development, so an amendment would be made to that agreement to ensure that this commemoration plan be included within the landscape plan.
Thank you.
Is that it? Thank you. Councillor Layton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think my first question got answered through Councillor Wong Tam's questioning about what the 3 elements were, because I thought I must have been missing something, because it does seem like it's like a plaque and a website, which seems like a pretty big leap from preserving what was a fairly significant piece. But my question that arose from that was, on your recommendation D, you're referring to while other preservation opportunities are explored, we're assuming that Ryerson's going to fulfill that obligation of actually exploring some of those opportunities. Is that Ryerson that's going to be preserving other opportunities?
That is Ryerson that would have to explore opportunities, but the city would certainly assist in any way. be in contact. I have been in contact with divisions that, with the city, who may be able to look forward to an idea of if we had a City of Toronto museum, would this be something the city could take on? And since this report has come out, there are a number of people who have come forward with lots of suggestions. So alternatives, there are obviously a variety of alternatives that could be explored.
Then after the 2 years, they can give us 60 days notice that the signs are going to be, they will no longer provide storage for the signs, which means the signs will go.
Yes, and the way we've structured is we said no less than 2 years, which means they would have to store it for 2 years. They could continue to store it after that for as long as they liked, but they're bound to 2 years, at which time, if they were deciding, or at any time after that, if they decided to remove it from storage, they would let the city know, which would essentially give us an opportunity to speak to them about it coming out of storage and work on the city's behalf.
So there was another really rather unique musical location in Toronto with some deep history and a neon sign. Fortunately, it was a place I got to play at when I was growing up in my brief rock career. The El Macombo restored its sign quite successfully. Did that have preservation status on it, or what was the story around why it was restored and could be restored while this one could not?
I have to say, I do not believe that our office was involved in that, so I think that was an initiative that was
Curious.
about the owners.
My last line of questioning is sort of, is it the sign itself that has the heritage value, or like a heritage district, are there elements of the sign that hold value and character for the neighborhood?
I think the sign, as we described in the original designation, is important from a variety of perspectives. It's important technically as a sign itself. It's important culturally. Its context is important. Sam Snyderman is exceptionally important. So the sign actually touches on a variety of things that are very important for the City of Toronto.
How often do you have to change the bulbs on a neon sign like that?
I'm afraid I have no idea.
Do you know how often you have to paint a sign like that? I'm just curious that if like the pieces of a sign change and restoration work has to be done, was it contemplated that perhaps capturing the character of the sign would then, or could be replicated on the site and might be acceptable, might be doable on the existing building and acceptable to the culture, to the heritage aspects of it, while not actually being the physical sign? Maybe there was something closer to the sign that we could have gone from a plaque on the road to circular LED lights on a wall that might be more flexible but have that same postcard-esque capture. Did we explore any of those options?
That is not something that was presented to us, so it is Ryerson's responsibility to explore a variety of options, and they did do that in a variety of ways. They explored things within the student center, things outside the student center, but what you're describing wasn't contemplated actually in the original agreement. It was the refurbishment of the original sign.
And I totally just made that up, so I don't even know if that would
No.
be acceptable by heritage standards. Would options like that perhaps be acceptable under the criteria for which the sign was designated, or not? You can tell me I'm wrong. I fully think that that's probably coming.
Often, Councillor, it's about how things are done, not the actual, pieces or line by line what you would do. I can imagine a scenario where you could honor the value of the sign with the actual sign. Yes.
With the actual, with a rep.
We don't really support replicas that's again a form of commemoration, right? So that would have to be fleshed out with a full concept.
So while not accepted as the easement, it may be an alternative form of commemoration.
Yeah, I certainly, there are many, many things that a person could suggest. The question is, would it satisfy this agreement, or would you have to amend the agreement in order to do that instead? The agreement was quite specific.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis.
The replica question was the one I had, because the the reasons for designation, technical, cultural, context, all have to do with, also involve location, correct? So are you saying that to a restoration could not include a new kind of technology that also replicated the cultural context and reinforced the cultural context elements of the designation because of where it's located and so on?
You mean a new technology to replace the neon?
Yes.
No, I
A
would.
replication, a restoration that had a new kind of technology. I don't know if that's possible, but.
That would bear consideration, yes.
So if you could take the frame, have it an exact replica with some other kind of technology, same location, it might be possible to meet the designation requirement.
I could see that would respect the heritage value, yes.
And that could be something you would explore in this next year?
I think.
Or Ryerson could explore?
I can't really answer that question.
Now I'm even more confused. And I'm still kind of torn by this question of safety. If it were relocated, you would still have to resolve, presumably, the safety issues, no matter where it was located. The questions that Councillor Matlow raised. Is that the case?
That would be my understanding, yes, that it would follow, the technical difficulties would follow the sign.
Then what is it you're exploring for the next year? It says that Ryerson has indicated willingness to work with the city on finding an alternative home for the stored signage. So you're just talking about storing it somewhere else?
No, actually, the recommendations that are before you
Yes.
are about the continued storage of the sign, while other preservation opportunities are explored. So that's fairly broad and could encompass any number of things.
Why would you not leave the terms and conditions in the agreement in place until such time as you have explored other alternatives?
Because the original agreement is about refurbishing the existing sign, restoring it, and putting it into very specific location. What's being recommended, given our understanding that it's technically difficult or not feasible because of safety considerations, that other preservation opportunities being explored is obviously in some ways purposely vague, because I'm not sure what those opportunities are. But those opportunities would not be the same as restoring the sign and putting them up at the location. They would be different.
We're being asked to relieve them of their obligations under this agreement based solely on technical issues, and we have no information before us on the technical issues. So, and we still don't know, as you've just said, whether or not some other technology might be possible, and we're going to just wave away this agreement today without an alternative on the table. Is that correct? Based on technical concerns exclusively?
Yes, that is correct. But I wouldn't say that it's a waving away of obligation. There are a variety of obligations that need to be satisfied in order for the agreement to no longer exist.
No, but you're saying the two, which is the, let me just ask legal, okay. The agreement says, put it on the front. If that can't be designed, put it on the library behind. No other alternative. That's what the terms are in the agreement. No other alternative location or
You wrap.
The first exercise is to put it in an appropriate location on the Ryerson Young Street lands. Not necessarily the facade, it could be inside the building, it could be on a facade, but certainly, yes, the first option was to place it onto the Young Street lands. Failing that, after 42 months, it was to be located on the library site on Gould Street.
Are you okay now? We're at 5:40 for your questions. Is that good? Maybe somebody
Well, I
can
still
pick
have
that up.
others, but I'm willing
Yeah, thank
to
you.
let it go.
Counselor Bailão.
I read the report, and I just want to identify the concerns, because I didn't see any technical or environmental stuff. So the only thing I see is there a risk of mercury spillage, which is going to happen no matter where this sign is going to put up, correct? Yeah. The decrease of a number of qualified neon signage professionals. This happens with any heritage issue that we have. Any heritage materials, it happens all the time in heritage, right?
Yes.
Yes. An increase in maintenance costs. So if Ryerson passes the buck to another institution or the city or Dundas Square, the other institution gets maintenance increased costs. Correct. Structural risk related to mounting requirements. It's going to happen no matter where we mount the sign,
Yes.
either at this site or other site. Amount of energy needed to operate the signage. Again, either it's going to be Ryerson or it's going to be, the buck's going to be passed to whoever's going to have the sign up. So what are the environmental issues? What is, I can't, I mean, other than identifying a different technology, which we know it hasn't been done, on top of the city doesn't even have a peer review on all these technical stuff. What has been really done to attempt to have the sign on the site and fulfill the agreement?
Sorry, they're in the middle of answering questions. Councillor Bailão's asking questions, getting distracted. Thank you.
So what, I'm sorry, the last,
Didn't hear it.
the nut of your question.
So really, what has been done? Because I see, if these are the technical and environment obstacles to not have the site on this, the sign on this site,
Yes.
they're gonna be there no matter what. So
Yes.
Ryerson is just gonna be passing the buck to whoever, or even the city, because in 2 years, if they don't do it, then if we wanna recover the signs, we're gonna be left with the bill.
If.
That's what you're recommending today. Give them 2 years, then if they don't do it, we'll have to decide. So most likely, if we want to recuperate the signs, the city's left with the bill.
Well, what the current agreement is for the complete restoration of the signs. There may
But what
be
you're
other
recommending
preservation.
today, you're recommending today, even though we don't have a peer review, even though the concerns that they have, most of them are economical, and they will happen no matter where we put up the sign. And we're giving them 2 years to store the sign, and then when the 2 years are up, we're left with the signs and the bill to pay if the city of Toronto wants to recover the signs?
I guess the bill would consist of a number of things. If you were to restore the sign, there would be a large cost associated with that.
Yeah, I definitely.
But you don't necessarily have to restore the sign if you come up with another preservation opportunity.
But that hasn't been explored.
Not outside the confines of the requirements for the site.
Is that it? Thank you. Then Councillor Fragedakis.
I'll try to be brief in the interest of time. To stop, who did the evaluation of the technical concerns? I don't see that in the attachments to this item in our binders.
No, the evaluation, we did not peer review.
No,
those
I realize
documents.
that.
So they came on faith to Ryerson and with good credentials. And so city staff, where it is beyond our expertise, takes the advice of experts.
Okay, so can I ask why you didn't conduct a peer review on the technical concerns? Is that normal?
We generally only conduct a peer review if we feel that the information is incomplete or perhaps not objective.
Who did the review?
So you think this is objective?
I would.
And complete?
I would say that the sign specialist who provided that information puts their own professional integrity on the line, and we had no reason to believe that there was no integrity in that review.
But oftentimes, when we have people who come before us and they give us, conduct their own evaluation, you review those, do you question their integrity?
Sometimes, if we feel that the conclusions are questionable, we will peer review. Yes, we have.
So you don't think that these conclusions are questionable?
During the period of evaluation, no. It's a reputable science specialist, and I will grant you it is beyond my personal expertise, but I have no reason to believe that a specialist would have an answer that wasn't anything other than professional.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Perks.
Thanks. Mary, it's not a principle when we designate a building as heritage that it has to be as energy efficient in its heating as a modern building, is it?
When we designate a building,
Yeah.
sorry.
When we designate a building, we don't worry about whether or not it's as energy efficient as a modern building, do we?
Can't really hear you.
That is not a consideration in terms
Yeah,
of
because
heritage value,
generally a
no.
heritage building wouldn't be as energy efficient as a modern building, would it?
Well, actually, you would be surprised,
I know
but
I'd
I
be
know where you're
surprised
going.
when I know.
Let me tell you, yeah.
I know that,
heritage buildings are extremely energy
some
efficient.
designs from certain periods, and you know what? I once had to
But,
listen to Adam Vaughan drink me through 4 beers getting a lecture on this. But I know that it's not, that many
understand
buildings
your
that
question.
we preserve are actually tremendously energy inefficient, and we permit that.
They
Certain
can
window
be, and.
certain window
yes,
designs are awful.
We take them with all of that, yes.
Right, okay, so that's not a value that we look for. Frankly, the energy inefficiency is just a matter that it would be more expensive to provide the electricity for than if they were trying to provide a light with a similar wattage to this, right? I mean, in fairness, you're not going to need a dedicated nuclear reactor for this sign, are you?
Sorry.
But it might be as dangerous.
In terms of the mercury, this one bothers me too. I appreciate you're not an engineer, but you're aware that every light in this room, every light bulb in the city of Toronto, every laptop screen, every BlackBerry phone, and every tablet has a mercury ballast in it. It's just what you do for light, you know that, except for incandescents, which are banned in the province of Ontario. I'm sorry, I just had to get those on the record. So I find it interesting and new, and I'm wondering how Heritage Department decided that this was important, that we have never had materials in terms of whether or not they needed to be disposed of as hazardous waste, or the efficiency of the heritage resource, energy efficiency of the heritage resource as a consideration in whether or not to preserve something before. Why is that actually a heritage value now?
Well, it should be clear, the sign is not protected under the Heritage Act. So we should probably call it historic.
Historic, thank you.
And so it specifically, these are considerations because it is a technical feature that has a design and operates in a particular way and uses a certain type of, gas and energy and so it is an object that operates. So its operation is fundamental to its presence.
So is the issue not whether or not there's hazardous materials or it's inefficient, but rather that they may not be able to operate it? Is that the actual issue?
In its operation, in its replacement and in its operation, it was not
Is this about
considered
them
to
not
be
being able to
safe.
get modern parts to keep it operating? Is that
In
the actual issue?
In the long term, there is a concern for that, although that was not one of the issues that we based our review on.
Okay, final question. On this area of the technology and so on, is it possible for members of the committee to have the actual documents from Ryerson circulated to us? Do you have those in hand here in the committee room?
I believe that Julio has gone to get a copy of the report.
Okay, thank you.
Didn't you ask one already? Okay, you can go around and around and around. Go ahead, you have one question.
Well, maybe two.
I still have a question.
Is the sign designated or listed as heritage?
Neither.
Yes, it can. Can it be? Has it been evaluated for such?
The sign, the council stated its intention to designate it in 2007. That designation was appealed, and as a settlement, prior to the item being heard at the Conservation Review Board, council repealed its intention to designate, and we entered into the legal agreement instead.
Why did you agree to settle?
I think that's subject to solicitor-client privilege. There was a confidential attachment that went with the settlement discussion when the agreement was discussed at council in 2008.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questioners? I have a few questions. Did you have any questions, Councillor McMahon? Okay. I have a few. I just quickly, Ms. McDonald, do owners sometimes worry about the sale or the value of their property or what the sale price might be if there's a designation on that?
Yes, they worry.
Yes, they do worry. So this opposing the sign could have meant simply because he was a little worried he might not get the price from Ryerson. Is that a possibility?
I don't want to speak to the evaluation of properties, but I know owners worry about that.
Owners do worry about that, don't they? 'Cause we even know a few right today that are worried about that.
I actually think heritage properties are more valuable.
We understand that, and we know. If I can just go back again, I'm just going to read from the report that as part of the easement agreement, Ryerson committed to the storage, restoration, and reinstallation of the signage on either the Ryerson Young Street lands or Ryerson Library lands. And so staff have been working with Ryerson on a site plan for how long? A year and a half? Do we know how long? Have you or?
Site plan's complete.
The site plan is complete. Have they been working with you on the site plan?
Yes.
They've been doing it all by themselves?
Oh, no, it's with city planning.
So, at what point did you agree they did not have to include the sign because of the safety issue that came in the technical document by Ryerson when you were going through the site plan?
I believe that this issue became more compelling for the city as a consideration in the early part of this summer. The timeline may be a little bit wrong in my head, but it was either in the late spring or early summer of this year.
Early summer of this year, so by that time, none of the site plan had the sign anywhere on it. Wasn't
Yes,
built into this design anywhere at all?
No.
Okay, just to be clear, it wasn't built in. And when did you receive that technical document? Well, you're looking that up.
I'll have to look that up.
So, just, maybe you can find that after, but I just want to go over the notion of restoration with you from a heritage point of view, because there was a heritage building that owned by the city, a lawn bowling club associated with the Bridgepoint redevelopment. Are you familiar with that one? Yes?
I'm very sorry, I was looking for the other piece of information that you asked me. What was your question
You have
again?
the date that was submitted and was a working document?
Yeah, I actually, the commemoration strategy.
No, the technical
Yeah,
document.
the technical information that it was first referenced, I must correct, came in as part of a commemoration strategy, December 12th, 2012. So that was the first time when these issues were raised and other design considerations
So there
were
was
put
not-
forward that staff would even begin talking about it, because we actually didn't want to talk about alternatives.
So it just wasn't in there, and that was based on the technical study, isn't the technical study? Okay. Just back to Bridgepoint, which is a major, there's many things restored there, including the mosaic wall had to be moved
Yes.
out of that hospital, and it was designed into the new hospital, even at great expense to Bridgepoint, in order to find a wall long enough to accommodate the mosaic.
Yes.
The little mushrooms, we call them mushrooms, that were designated, they had to design around those and include those actually in the landscaping, is that right?
Yes.
And for the Lawn Bowling Club, which is actually owned by the city, the notion of restoring it, when it was restored, was there not an accessibility ramp included?
Yeah, yes, there was, and the location was,
Yes, the location, it was moved, but to restore the building, a ramp was added. That, it wasn't in the original condition, is that right?
yes, often we need to update older buildings for
Oh, we
modern
update
uses.
older things, okay. And how about the lights? Did we just use the same lights, or was there rewiring there? Did we update that?
I'm afraid I don't know specifically, but I would assume that if it needed updating, we would update them.
So restoring also means updating it to a usable condition. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
So just as the Lawn Bowling Club was restored to a usable condition, in the restoration of the sign for Sam's, why are we insisting that it's restored exactly using everything from the past rather than restoring it to a usable condition using materials that are today's materials? I'm having trouble understanding that. For Ryerson's argument for that.
The restoring with alternative technologies was not something that was put forward as an alternative.
But that would not be, that would be restoring, would it not? Because just as you restored the Lawn Bowling Club and you updated the wiring and you didn't go back with incandescents, you put in new lights, you didn't put an outhouse, you put an actual toilet, we are bringing that up to a certain standard, that should be something that we should consider as part of restoration. We're not restoring something to a historic period, we're restoring it so it's usable and part of our era. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
Thank you. Any more questions? Nope. Okay, now we're into it with we've done staff questions. We're going to have second round. Would you like a second round? Go ahead. We've had Mahavik on a second round. As long as it's not, if you can keep it short. Don't try.
I will certainly try. I've also asked the staff to go retrieve the technical consultant's report from Ryerson, so all the councillors can have a copy of it. Because I do think that there's a number of issues, concerns raised that we need to have the answers for. So with respect to understanding the legal criteria and as it pertains to heritage preservation, I want to fully understand this because heritage staff generally shun proposals of replicas. So therefore, you don't tear down a true Victorian property and replace it with a full Victorian property. Is that correct?
Councillor, I have to apologize. Julio just came down with the information. I was listening to him, and I did not hear your question.
Sorry, just with respect to the guidelines around heritage preservation, conservation in place, it's generally not accepted to tear down full Victorian properties or period properties and replace them with updated versions, full Victorian or full Georgian, full Edwardian, full Greek revival, you name it.
No, replication is not something that we support.
Okay, so I've struggled with this in trying to understand the attributes that were identified as heritage. So originally there was a desire to designate the building because there was an understanding that the building may have heritage attribute, heritage resources. Is that correct?
I actually all I know is that the original motion that came as a notice of motion was for the sign.
Was only for the sign?
It was specific to the sign.
And because the Ontario Heritage Act does not have any language or any policy that's been tested and working on signage designation or signage designation, then how did we come to this arrangement?
Well, it's actually for that reason that we came to this arrangement. The Heritage Act designates what they call real property. And so it's a debatable question about whether or not a sign can be considered real property in the sense of legal lands. And so a sign without a building has no address.
So on the facade of this structure, I remember it well because I used to work at CCAL Radio, and I was a little Yonge Street rugrat. I also recall that there were multiple signs on the building. It was not just the two large signs that are of the dimensions of 38 feet wide and 38 feet tall and 48 feet wide. There were also smaller spinning desks on this sign, and inside the store there were additional spinning discs, and there was all sorts of other memorabilia and artifacts that were there, if I can call them artifacts now.
Yes, that's correct.
How did we come to the conclusion of designating those two large signs, but not the two smaller signs that were butting the corner, that wrapped the corner of the building?
Well, the proposed designation was for the signage generally. Through the discussions and through the agreement, we narrowed it down so that the agreement would cover what we felt were the most iconic elements of the signage. Also, because we understood that there was, even though Ryerson hadn't purchased the property, it was certainly known to everybody that that's the area where they were developing. And so we wanted to come with a reasonable and representative, iconic example of the signage, and so we limited it to the larger features.
Does the evaluation of heritage often sit on one site? Is there no consideration for contextual evaluation? And specifically, I'm trying to ask about the bright lights, big city concepts on Yonge Street, the fondness and the remembrance of Yonge Street as this dynamic place of big signs from A&A to everyone else that was there at that corner. I'm just trying to understand why these two large signs and not all the signs, because wouldn't the facade of the building, if signage was what we were after, should we not have pursued the entire building? Wasn't that Sam the Record Man?
Well, I think Sam the Record Man, the building was essentially a cladding of signs. Really, that's part of what made it identifiable. And through discussion and negotiation, we believed that these were the most iconic elements for this site, for this property, this particular institution, and those signs. So that's all I can say about why we arrived at that. We felt that that was a fair, reasonable, and important representation for the property.
Thank you.
We'll be able to wrap that up. Oh, thank you so much. Is that it, Councillor? Is that a wrap? Councillor Perks, did you have more questions? Can we get to the speeches? Okay, then you could talk about that when you come to speak, so that's fine. We'll start now with, I'm sure Councillor Wong-Tam, you want to speak.
Yes, and I do have an amendment. And if the clerks can put it on the screen, I'm just going to try to explain it.
Can you speak louder? I think
yes, of
everyone
course.
can hear.
The clerks can kindly put the amendment on the screen, and I'm going to try to explain what it is that I myself, along with City Legal and Heritage Preservation Service, is trying to do. One is that we receive the report. Two is that we recommend the City Council that the easement agreements between the City and Ryerson, as registered, are going to be amended and released from title, and we secure new agreements that would ensure that we find an alternative location for those signs. And then three, finally, is that we would also be in accordance with the commemoration plans that was agreed upon, that's submitted by Ryerson, is that we would approve that. We also request the Chief Planner and the Executive Director of City Planning to report back to Toronto East Shore Community Council within a year on Ryerson's attempts to find a new location for the sign. And of course, understanding that during all this time, Ryerson will continue to store the sign, ensure the sign, maintain the sign, and protect the sign, which is what they've done, I guess, since the building came down. As a local councillor, oftentimes we inherit files, And I can't say that and I have to say it's been a very interesting jigsaw puzzle for me to put together. And I have some emotional attachment to Yonge Street, certainly as a local councillor, but also I have an emotional attachment to Yonge Street for its cultural vitality, which is something that I talk about quite often. I worked at CKLN Radio, like a number of people. I would say the farthest left on the FM dial is where I spent some of my formative years as a development director. Some people say I'm still there. But I think what's really important to note is that we all have a connection, whether it's directly or indirectly, whether you're from, Hamilton or Windsor, everyone knows Yonge Street. Everyone. And there's certainly a whole generation that really knows Sam the Record Man. And one of the things that I've struggled with in this particular file is that we keep talking about the signs. And they are important because they represent a time in the past, and they represent all sorts of emotions. And I was in my teenage years when I first, discovered Yonge Street on my own without my parents, and I kept coming back because it was exciting. But I also remember Sam Snyderman, the fine man. And regardless of his objections to designating the signs as heritage, and he had objections, clearly he's the one that filed the appeal, I still think that it's worth commemorating the man and the contributions that he made to Canadian music, and trying to champion his ideals of what that meant is really what I remember as someone who was his neighbor, literally just down the street and into the basement when CKLN was in a basement. That's kind of, I think, in many ways lost, because we keep talking about these iconic signs, but we're not talking about the person. And really, what are we trying to celebrate? Is it not the value of the person and the actions of this person? Like, I think that the website and the electronic display around commemoration to celebrate this man, Sam, is quite fulsome in the website when you take some time to take a look at it. And for a group of people who may not be from Toronto, who may not know what the spinning discs represent, they can go to that website and get much more information. It will be full, and it'll be informative, and it supplements what's already what will be on the street in one form or another. The motion really before you does a couple of things. We will have to decide on what to do with these signs at some point in the future. And I think that it's very important for us to come to some resolution. In 2011, when this community council approved the Ryerson Student Learning Center, contained in that, and City Council approved it unanimously, contained in that was some language that there was not going to be a sign coming back on the Ryerson Student Learning Center. It did not absolve Ryerson of all responsibility of finding another location for the sign, but certainly it was not going to be on the Ryerson Student Learning Center. And I think that what Ryerson is now being asked to do, and I really want to address this because I think people need to be treated fairly. And as an institution, Ryerson may be this monolithic institution, and a lot of things have been said about Ryerson. And Ryerson and I have our tough discussions around development. And certainly I have had some very firm language with them on what is appropriate built form. But I think that what I've heard in terms of letting Ryerson out of the deal, Ryerson reneging on a contract, is not really fair, because they have been part of those discussions with city staff from day one. And I know that one of the reasons why city staff did settle on designating those two signs and not the entire building or what have you, is because their lawyers were making a fairly compelling case that it did not have the cultural heritage historical value. So that's why we are here trying to preserve these signs. Nevertheless, we're here. But I do want to say that Ryerson has been a great contributor to the City of Toronto with respect to the restoration of Maple Leaf Gardens, which I think that for those who don't know the neighborhood, and I certainly do on Church Street, that was an abandoned building for 10 years. That was a complete scar in our neighborhood when that building closed down. And they undertook that project when no one else will. And I think there needs to be some acknowledgement that Ryerson is a champion of heritage. They've never abdicated the responsibility to the city. They've never once not answered the phone call of legal staff or heritage preservation staff. And I think that has to be put forward as part of the discussion. There is no vilification. I'm not trying to vilify anyone. I think it's just really important that we work together and find a resolution, honor Sam Snyderman, the man, and his great contributions, and also remember Canadian history for what it is and what it was. Thank you.
Councillor Wong-Tam, I gave you a little bit of extra time because it's a big issue, but nobody else is going to get such good treatment here. I want you to know that now. Councillor Matlow, and then I have...
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would the clerk please put my motion on the screen? My motion is simply to hold Ryerson to its word, to fulfill its agreement that it made with the city in 2008. The reason I do this is this. I believe that the city has done overall an awful job at protecting our heritage. And I don't just mean now, and I'm not pointing fingers at any one group of staff or even one council. I'm talking about for decades, Toronto has done an awful job at protecting our story. We've demolished so many buildings and taken away so many places that should be part of our heritage in the name of progress. Madam Chair, there's just a little bit of noise, and I'd appreciate just... Thank you. I'd like to just touch on a few points that were made. First of all, I think that Councillor Wong-Tam is one of the finest councillors in this building, and my disagreement with her is genuinely respectful. I just disagree with sort of if it's fully the man or the structure, the sign that we are trying to preserve. I recognize that Sam Snyderman, at the end of the day, didn't support the heritage designation. That being said, though, we need to commemorate his story and his contributions to our city. He was one of the Toronto greats, like Johnny Lombardi, like Ed Mirvish. But at the same time, I don't think that we should look to Gustav Eiffel to ask him whether or not the Eiffel Tower should be retained in Paris. That was actually supposed to be demolished 20 years after it was constructed. And they decided, because it became a symbol of Paris, to protect it. As well, it was a convenient communications tower. We have a precedent that we need to consider as well. Like I said earlier on another item, I was in Boston a couple weeks ago, and like many cities, Quebec City, many cities around Canada and North America, they've really done an impressive job at protecting their heritage. In Boston, they've been able to protect 300-year-old buildings, and I do believe that we should be able to protect a sign. We have a written agreement with Ryerson. I believe that they need to be held to their word. I don't want to send a message, and I think this is a very significant point. I don't want to send a message. I don't want council to send a message to any institution or developer or individual in the city that if they sign an agreement with the city that they're going to protect our heritage, and then they figure out some way to argue against it after the fact, that they're, Councillor Vaughan, that we're going to capitulate at the end of the day. I see this as capitulating. I haven't seen any evidence in front of us. None was delivered that was peer-reviewed to say that this safety concern is substantive. If indeed it is substantive, as has been said, I don't understand why this location is any different than any other location with respect to the environmental concerns that we have about the sign itself. If there are structural problems with the sign, I expect that Ryerson fulfills obligations to invest in it and make sure that it can be maintained and resurrected upon the site that it intended to in the first place, or it said it did. I believe that the website is fantastic. I think that there should be a descriptive plaque. I think that there should be a commemorative sidewalk out front anyway. I mean, I think it would actually be great to have the sign and a descriptive plaque to tell tourists and residents alike and school kids and everybody what this was, who was there, who performed there, why are we protecting the signs above us. But bottom line is this. If you please take a moment to go to Quebec City, go to New York, go to virtually any European city, go to Chicago, go to Boston, go to cities anywhere and everywhere around this continent and around the world, and you will see what they've done to protect their stories. They have remarkable city museums. Toronto has done a piss-poor job at protecting our story. Sorry. We've a very poor job at protecting a disastrous job at protecting our story. And this is something that we can do to send a very strong message that we intend to turn the page. Please hold Ryerson to its word, and if they come back to us with a reasonable, with something more than we've seen to change agreements, we'll look at it. But I haven't seen that today.
That's it.
Well, then I'm going to do a question of the councillor, because that's one of my problems with what you're saying in your motion, is that if we vote for your motion, it's actually digging us in to say, no other commemorative options, you have to give us this. And then I don't believe we can, well, I guess we could revisit it, could there be new information? But this really digs us in, which makes it a little uncomfortable for me when I'd like to look at at an expanded commemorative option, which it seems like we'd be going for anyhow. I can easily answer
that. The other motions before you, I believe, allows Ryerson to step back from its deal with us. What my motion does is it retains the deal that we have today. If they have a new suggestion that they want us to consider, they are welcome to bring it to our attention. But this is about saying that we are ensuring that they stick to the deal, and we are always welcome and we're always free to consider new ideas.
Are we, though, because we will have ruled that no, we want to stick to this plan and not enter in and not entertain any commemorative strategy? That's what, because anything else but those signs going up is a commemorative strategy.
You got it. And Ryerson would have to provide us with an idea that is so remarkable and commemorates the signs in such a way that truly protects and preserves the heritage that we're trying to preserve, that we would be open to reconsidering. I don't believe today is the day, because we haven't seen that evidence yet.
Okay. Are you having a private?
No.
You finished? Is that your last question?
Read my motion.
Finish
It's about
that,
retaining
Frank?
the agreement we have today.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Davis has a question of you, Councillor Matlow.
Councillor Matlow, and I hope Mr. Haley can nod his head as I say this.
Councillor Vaughn?
Are you aware that the original agreement will remain in place and all of the obligations contained within it at the same time that these negotiations contained in Councillor Wong Tam's motion proceed?
My concern is that Councillor Wong Tam's motion takes us, and you've seen this happen with a number of issues here.
Yeah.
If we demonstrate support and interest in genuinely entertaining other locations for the sign, I believe that we will progress in that direction. I believe when we hear about the safety concerns, there's been nothing demonstrated to me, nor any of us, to suggest that those safety concerns would be any different elsewhere.
No, it was just a straight-up question.
Yeah.
You're aware that this agreement remains in place and all of the obligations, which are to place it on the Young Lands or place it on the library as an alternative. Those obligations will still exist and are still binding if they cannot come up. I just want to make sure that that's understood.
I'm aware of what you're saying, but I also believe
it's not clear in the motion.
That we are
so-
progressing in a different direction.
Okay, thanks.
To ask a question, irrespective of what may be progressing, are you concerned that the site plan is at such a stage that there never could be any, the sign could not go on any wall?
Absolutely, and I think we need to be as clear as daylight to Ryerson that we expect them to go back, revise their plans to be able to accommodate the sign the very way that they agreed to in the first place.
Thank you, that was my question. All right, now, who's up next? Councillor Perks. Who else?
Thank you. I'm to speak quickly. I've now read the report, which is actually a 2-page letter from the consultant, and I can clear up some of the mysteries about this. But before I do that, I want to say I will be supporting Councillor Wong Tam's motion, because Councillor Wong Tam's motion actually is perfectly in keeping with the spirit of the original agreement signed with Ryerson, which was to attempt to get it on the front face, and if you can't, we'll find the other location. That's actually what the agreement said. And I was around this table when we debated that. I wasn't intimately involved in the conversations, but I certainly got a thorough briefing from Councillor Ray, who felt that he needed my vote on the item. So we're not really losing any ground here. But to clear up some of the mysteries around the environmental concerns, some of them are real and some of them are not. So in terms of the big mercury problem, yes, compact fluorescent, yes, neon tubes use mercury to produce light. So do the lights immediately over your head, and so does every light bulb in every building in Ontario. The ratio is 1 indoor compact fluorescent is the same mercury as 200 outdoor neon tubes. So that's how much the mercury ratio is. The consultant is concerned that they will catch fire, and that because there's a potential for these lights to catch fire, we should be very, very worried. There's also a potential for these to catch fire, so that you know, and we should be worried about that too. We should actually be more worried about the PVC in the AV booth, because if it catches fire, that's much more toxic than the mercury in the bulbs of our head. And actually, if Josh's phone catches fire, that's even worse. There is an issue about there are only 3 companies in Canada that this is from the letter again, that can fix these right now. And that's actually an interesting question for our staff to think about in terms of heritage designation in the future. The technologies we develop now are fleeting. They're by in an eye blink. Whereas the technologies used to build buildings 300 years ago, those were 100-year technologies, and the ability to, or more. So I'm actually don't really care much about that one. It's more like, worrying about hanging on to your Betamax tapes. Some of us still do that with hope. The real issue, though, that I'll tell you this, Ryerson's real issue is that you have to have a transformer behind the wall to step the current to the right level for the neon to run on, and that's going to add more weight structurally to the wall for the building that they have in mind than they want to add. That's the real technical issue. The stuff about them catching fire is silly. The stuff about the mercury is grossly exaggerated. And yes, you might have to get some guy who actually, it's going to be hard to find sourcing for this. Now, given that Councillor Wong Tam has still put an obligation on Ryerson to be able to figure out another site for this, that means they've got to figure out a place where the extra weight of the transformers necessary to step the current to the right level will be part of the design. That's the task Ryerson has to step up and meet. And I'm convinced, knowing Councillor Wong Tam, once she sets her mind that someone she's negotiating with will meet an obligation they've agreed to, they will be held to that standard.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor McConnell.
So I just felt the need to talk about the heritage of this place, because it isn't really just about a sign. It's about the birthplace, one of the birthplaces of the Canadian music industry. And I can tell you, looking at the white hair, that during the 60s and the 70s, this was the place in which musicians from right across the country were able to pay their rent and to feed themselves. It was very, very difficult in those days. And there were very, very few places. There was the Treble Clef in Ottawa, run by Harvey Glatt. There was Sam the Record Man, and there were a couple of places, very small places, out west. In some cases, Billy Bryant's father, for example, had a smoke shop and a couple of bins in the back because no one sold Canadian records. Nobody played Canadian records, and nobody sold Canadian records. And so Canadian music artists had a terrible time. And if you think about the wave of kind of the British wave and the American wave, there wasn't much room for them. And unless they had, and there wasn't a culture here that supported artists like it did in Quebec, for example, where the Quebec government encouraged young musicians to be able to play. So although absolutely the Stampeders and Bruce Cockburn and Gordon Lightfoot, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell all played in and around Toronto, in Yorkville, and in the Gerrard Street Village. And so they were able to feed themselves. They were able to place their records into bins that perhaps in the long term would make them, in some cases, millionaires. But there were many, many, many other musicians who never had that status. And I know this because, first of all, in Ottawa, I worked in Le Hibou, one of the first coffee shops, which actually brought through and developed Bruce Cockburn, who worked beside me, and also people like Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee, people who did not have a place to make their music. And so Harvey and Sam were really important to be able to hook the connections together so that people could put food in their bellies. And so I know this also because my husband, as many of you know, was a music producer and a manager, and managed many, many, many people, probably 50 or 60 musicians as I think about them, many of whom went nowhere, but many of whom went into different worlds. So, you know, the Mythical Meadow that no one would have ever heard of actually lived off their records for 10 years. The Townsmen, who did The Lion Sleeps Tonight, were able to feed their kids, and they did have kids. And, you know, Downchild Blues Band and Horn, which came from Montreal and spawned off Billy Bryant's and many other people. And Downchild, as you know, went on very successfully to be the Blues Brothers, to be their music to be used in the Blues Brothers, and Robbie Rocks. And I can think of just all of these people in Perth County that, you know, Cecil Smith was in, and, you know, Ian and Sylvia. These were not people who went to Rexdale or to Scarborough, or they went to this corner to make their records sell. And whether he took 5 or he took 10 or he took 20, sometimes he'd take cartons and everyone would be so happy. But the placing of this is a place in space. It is not simply something that could be put over in a museum somewhere else. That's why emotionally it's so important to our music and to people who are of my age, because it is an era and it is a heritage that allowed this country to have a music industry and some of the great names that we have in the music industry in a place where we didn't support our artists. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? I think Councillor Layton has a very quick.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I gotta admit that this has been a very difficult battle in my own mind of where do we put our importance in the city with functioning in a reality that things grow old, things break, and things have to be replaced. On the one hand, we have an incredible piece of Toronto's heritage and Toronto's past that we have entered into an agreement with one of Toronto's most illustrious institutions that were there to protect it. New information came forward, and now we're being told that it can't be. So on the other hand of the coin, we have to determine where that measure is of what's reasonable and what's not in this case. This idea of, and someone tweeted at me this idea of nostalgia versus heritage, when sometimes it's just because we know it so well rather than it having that significance. I don't actually necessarily think it was just those big, beautiful neon lights, those discs that were what what Sam the Record Man meant to a lot of us growing up in Toronto. They were a symbol, though, and it's important to recognize that symbol, and it's important to have that symbol there for the next generations. But when remembering, I'm not necessarily married to the fact that it has to be the same bricks and mortar, because I know in the case when Honest Ed's comes around, people are going to say, we want to keep that sign. Well, in fact, that's the third sign that they've had up, and it's falling apart too. And the plywood that's the base of it, and the light bulbs will break, and the wires will get burnt out, and it'll all have to be replaced, and it'll all be a new sign by the time we end up replacing it somewhere. But we will have to look at marking the site and the relevance of the site. But that, I don't necessarily think a plaque in the ground and some colored concrete is enough in this case. So the original motion, I was prepared to vote against. But I was also prepared to vote against Councillor Matlow's motion, which I will do, and not because I don't like Councillor Matlow or think that it should be protected, but because I think it digs us in too far. Because I think that it is difficult to get rid of these neon lights and or replace them and fix them up. I think there'll probably be 99% new equipment on them anyhow. So maybe we have to look at the spirit of those lights and what is it we love about them so much, that to come up with a more respectful and a more significant way of remembering the history that is on that site. Does it have to be in the same exact position? I don't think that's true either, because things can move to fit a little bit better in a new dynamic. Does it have to be neon? Maybe not. And maybe that's something, clearly that can't be written in the heritage documents, but if the character and the spirit of those lights are strong in the neighborhood somewhere, I'm comfortable with that being enough. And for that reason, on my second read of Councillor Wong Tam's motion, where I wasn't going to support it, I think I will, because I think it does capture that, and it puts Ryerson on the hook to fulfill their side of the bargain on it, but make sure we have that respectful and significant recognition. But I'll be looking with interest to see what that turns into. Again, I think the good people at Ryerson and the wonderful Councillor Wong Tam will be able to figure that out and come up with something that'll be special that the city will love.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor Vaughn, yes?
Be very brief, just to tell you that I'm going to take all 5 minutes. No. Look, there are many ways to think about this issue, and some of the musicians and community members that spoke today brought to our attention what I think the real goal here is. It's not simply commemorating the signs, it's commemorating the man, Sam. Who all of us have stories, and you're starting to hear them spill out. I was his paper boy. I went to school with his sons at Oakwood Collegiate. You know, I worked down the street and at CKLM, but I worked at a bar where the SAM staff used to come in and drink after work and share the stories of literally the last days of Sam the Record Man. The issue here is that we have an agreement with Ryerson and we're struggling to figure out how to realize it, to commemorate what is one of the city's one of our city's folk heroes, who was present on Yonge Street, who was physically represented by those signs and many other things. And it's an incredibly delicate memory. When those signs come off the building, they're built onto a building. They're not built and then installed. They're not, like hanging a picture in a gallery. They're a very fragile environment that get built onto a building. When you take them off the building, they become even more fragile. They're going to have to be repainted. They're going to have to be touched up. There is going to have to be restoration, if not replacement, in whole or in part of almost all these signs. They are not durable signs. It doesn't mean it's impossible. It doesn't mean Ryerson doesn't have an obligation. But I think the obligation that we've been asked to live up to is the spirit of the obligation that was enunciated in the agreement when Councillor Ray was here, which was to find a way to preserve what was one of the great institutions of the city, one of the great citizens of our city, in a way that's respectful to his name and his honor and his memory. And that's the challenge in front of us. Councillor Wong Tam's motion has caught that spirit and has provided a way forward that allows Ryerson to finish its building, allows the sign to be protected in the interim, and for a resolution to come forward back to council to be assessed by the people that have poured their hearts and souls into the deputations today. And the test will be whether or not, when the resolution comes forward, if it meets their standard of memory and their standard of celebration. But to equate this with the preservation of, St. Michael's Cathedral, or the preservation of Queen's Park, or the preservation of the O'Keefe Center, which we didn't do, is not to understand that this is not quite the same animal that we're trying to cage and to preserve. It's a very different thing. It's a sign. And as a result of that, we went into it perhaps not with eyes wide open, but now we have to come to terms with it. And so Councillor Wong Tam's motion shows us a way forward, and that's why I'll be supporting it.
Any other short speeches? No? All right then. We are going to vote. Councillor Wong Tam's motion was placed first. So we're voting on that first. Pardon me? No, thank you for that, Councillor. We know. We're just going to vote on this now, and we'll have a recorded vote. Would you like that recorded? Councillor Wong Tam's motion. And I'm asking that it be recorded. All those in favor of the motion. Councillor Wong Tam's motion. Councillor Perks, Davis, Wong Tam. Is that your finger up, Councillor Mihevik? Oh, now there's 4 up. Councillor Mihevik, Councillor Vaughn, Councillor Layton, Councillor Bailao. All those opposed? Councillor McMahon, Councillor Matlow, Councillor McConnell, Councillor Fletcher. So that passes. Thank you.